Hi, this is Patrick from JDM Gems. Today we're going to be working on this 1995 Toyota Celsior. The issue we're having with it is the transmission is stuck in third gear. We're going to be replacing the ECU capacitors to see if this is the issue. We also have another issue of the cluster not lighting up. We're going to see if that's a separate issue or if that's part of the ECU. So first we're just going to tackle the ECU and then maybe potentially worry about the cluster. Also, it's stormy outside, so you may hear some thunder in the background. So we apologize for that. The parts required for this job are going to be a trim removal tool or a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, combination wrench, small diagonal cutters, a 10mm socket, extension, and ratchet, a soldering iron, and flux core solder. So first we're just going to disconnect the battery terminals. Just like that. Next we're going to remove the side panel right here. Next I'll be removing the kick panel right underneath the glove box. You'll just pry down and then pull out. Next, I'll be removing these 3 screws on the top of the glove box. They're holding in the entire glove box assembly. There's going to be a few more, but I'm just going to get these 3 first. Alright, next we're going to be removing this hidden panel right here. And it should have a screw or bolt underneath it. There's one part. Alright. So this is holding the airbag connector. So next we're going to remove this 10mm right here. So I realize we have to remove this. Looks like a speaker. Oh, it's a light bulb. Okay. Now we can continue with prying the glove box. And you can see the top is off. But it looks like something is still stuck at the bottom. So I was thinking we have to go back under, but there's a hidden door right here. You have to pop up. Okay, there. And you can see the 10mm right there. Now the glove box should come out. There's a connector right here. There we go. So now we have the glove box out of the way. Our ECU is right here. We're going to start by disconnecting all the harness plugs. Just do all of them to make it easy for us. There's about 10 plugs to get them all out of the way. Okay. So first, we're going to remove these 3 10s under here. So next we're going to remove the 3 on the top, but I'm also going to remove this one just to make it a little bit easier to get everything out. Get this out of the way. Move that out of the way. So hopefully this is the last one. Can use an impact. Oh, there's more. How much? Oh my God, there's more.
How many?
2 more. So appears to be 2 more on the very top, right behind the computer mirror vibration. There's 1 and 2. Let's see if that's it. And there she is. One thing I did want to try out is I found an ECU from a junkyard from a 96 LS400. So we're just gonna plug everything back in and see if this will even work with an American ECU on a Japanese car and see if there's any differences. So we have everything plugged in, the American ECU with everything else. We hooked up the battery. And we're gonna see if we can start it. And the cluster seems to be working, but we'll see if that stays. It was working, but we had a whole bunch of lights on the dash. But it seems like the cluster is fixed. So that's a good sign. So now we have the ECU out of the car. We're going to be removing these 6 bolts on both sides of the ECU. And we're going to be replacing the capacitors with these. We're just going to see which ones are leaking or which ones match up to these. And we'll just replace them. There's about 10 in here. So let's get started. And I believe we have to take these off as well. Okay. And then we'll just remove these, holding the motherboard on. So now we can remove this part of the motherboard and we'll just fold it back since we can't actually take it off with these ribbon cables as they are attached. So we'll just fold it back carefully. And then here you'll see an array of capacitors. Right off the bat I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. However, there's 11 in this kit, so I gotta find where the other 2 are. But we'll just be replacing those capacitors and see if the ECU works. So here you can see the capacitor is bad. There's a few of them like this. There seems to be a brown residue on the bottom, meaning they are leaking. There's one. Here's another. And then right here. So 3 capacitors at least are bad. And then here I made a chart showing all the capacitors I will be replacing and the corresponding values, and then the capacitors next to them. So a good thing about this ECU is all the negative parts of this capacitor are facing towards the harness side of the ECU. So it'll be easy once you remove all these which way the capacitors are going to go back, because all the negatives are going to be facing that way. So now we'll lay it on its side and we'll find the corresponding legs for each of the capacitors we're going to be removing. And we'll simply be just removing the solder that's holding these legs to the board by melting it off and gently pulling it out. And there's one. The next part, we are just going to be putting in our new capacitors in the corresponding spots that are shown on the little diagram. First, we're going to be removing the little bit of solder that's left on the board. So now that we have the capacitor all the way in, you can see that I bent the legs like that, and the capacitor it's right here, the new one. And you can see the negative side, or the silver side, is facing the connector right here. So all the negatives are going to be facing that way. So now we have the legs like this. I'll start the soldering iron again. Now that I put the bead of solder right there, we're gonna just be cutting as close to the solder point as possible to get rid of these legs. And we'll just do this to every single capacitor, and we'll start the install process into the car. So we ended up having one additional capacitor that came with our kit, and that was because in the USDM ECU, the capacitor could be found right there. But on the JDM ECU, it's not there, so we're not gonna use it. So we're just going to put this back together since we have all the new capacitors put in. Just make sure every single one is in the right spot and that the negatives are facing the connector. So next, once we have the ECU brackets put on, we can put it back in the car. Before putting the ECU back, I would strongly recommend plugging everything back in like I did here, plugging in the ECU and taking it for a drive before putting it in, because you wouldn't want to put this back in the car and it not work and then have to take it back out and redo everything. So next we'll put the 3 nuts back into the studs. So next we'll be mounting this onto the brackets of the ECU. Just like that. So the nut will go in the bottom here. And then they bolt for the top. Next we'll be putting this box, mounting it on the right side of the ECU. Just a bolt on top, not like on the bottom, just like the last one. So on the last clip, we forgot to install this height adjustment relay into this stud here. You'll only have this if you have a Type C Celsior, as it's for the adjustable suspension, only available on the Type Cs. Next, we'll be putting this relay into this position. Okay. Lastly, we'll be putting this brown relay onto the stud of the upper ECU mount. Okay. All right, for the next part, we are going to be plugging in all the connectors. A lot of it is color coded. So the blue will go to blue, green will go to green. All the grays will go to the ECU. The white will go here. So we'll figure it out. We'll start from top and go down. So at this point, make sure you have the 2 nuts left with the fat washers. These are gonna go for the glove box. Make sure you didn't use them for any of the brackets here. So make sure you're left with these 2 fat washer nuts. For the next part, we're gonna be putting these 2 connectors in. Black goes in here. The gray will go in this guy. And make sure to snake this through the top here. Try to get the nuts onto these studs. One. Alright. Next, we're going to be popping in this SRS connector into this opening, just like that. Now we'll just close up this access hole, like that. Make sure the glove box works. All right. Next, we're going to be putting the 3 screws into here. All right. Lastly, we'll be putting this lower cover on. There's a light here that goes in just like that. You won't have these wires. These are aftermarket wires that came with the car when I bought it. So chances are you won't have to worry about that. All right, right there. Right there. We're just gonna put the side paneling back on. Alright, that's it. Lastly, we'll just put the battery terminals back on. Alright, so now we're gonna be testing to make sure everything works. Hopefully you did this before. We put everything back together. And you can see the cluster is staying on. Before the cluster was not staying on. However, we still have to fix the RPM and the speedo, but that might be a cluster issue. So we installed the ECU and the car works, so we knew that the transmission issue was the capacitors and the ECU the whole time. However, our cluster is still not fixed, so we are going to be removing the cluster and replace the capacitors on there in a different video. A couple things to keep in mind when installing the capacitors onto the motherboard. Make sure the solder is flowing well onto the motherboard and it's not just clumping up. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good connection and you're going to have to redo the entire job. Second, try the ECU before installing it, since you don't have to do all the work again putting it together or putting the car together and then taking it back out. I hope this video helped, and if it did, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next repair. What a pain in the butt. Snaps into here. Doesn't snap, it turns. I'll do that again. Okay.
Alright.
It's the nut that keeps on giving. This is the embarrassing part because I don't remember where anything else goes.
I just apologize for the rain.
I apologize for the rain. Other than that, I think we're good, right?